And we are live with episode 24 of the Wake Up Podcast. And I think this is the third episode of the Bitcoin Time series. And I have someone who I've learned loads from on this episode with me. The man himself, Jeff Booth, the author of The Price of Tomorrow. And I think one of the best books of 2020 in the sense that it really brought to the fore the idea of the positive force of deflation, because I think deflation is always viewed as some negative force. And yeah, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the show, A, and B, also for writing and contributing to the Bitcoin Times, and C, for everything that you do in the broader space.
Thanks, Alex. It's a huge pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you. Matt, can you, for those, I think anyone who's listening to my stuff has heard of your stuff, but for the people who haven't, can you give a little bit of a background on you, maybe the book you wrote, why you wrote it, and let's kick off there, and then I think we'll dive into a discussion about the actual article itself, because I really want to pull apart some elements in there, and
Sure. I'm going to go super quick here.
Yeah, sure.
Myself, I'm a tech entrepreneur. Started many companies, investor in many companies, on the board of a lot of companies, and from that purview, from that front seat there, I get to see what's happening, how fast everything's moving in technology. And that's really great for me, my family, for the companies that I'm involved with, because they're growing extraordinarily fast. One I started 18 months ago it was zero in revenue. Now it's 10 million a month in revenue. So when you understand how to construct companies to be able to take advantage of what's happening in technology, you can create a lot of value. Now, all of those companies create value by trying to find areas of the market that are inefficient and that can help people. In fact, a company cannot win, it doesn't grow unless it's actually serving someone else's needs. So from that view, that's what I do with my time. That's my main time. But why I wrote the book is, when I looked at the sum total of that time and said, prices should be coming down everywhere, because technology is creating these efficiencies, and those efficiencies remove jobs, and we gain from those efficiencies, but it's deflationary, and that means prices should be coming down. They're not. They're going up. Why are they going up? And so it was a quest for knowledge on what was happening to block technology's progress from being broadly distributed, and a realization that my kids would grow up in a really bad world if I didn't do something. And this is probably 10 years of talking about it to friends, family, and everything else. People probably got tired of me talking about it. And I realized I got to do something about it. By the way, I am the most reluctant author ever. I didn't want to write a book. I didn't need to write, when you're going up against an entire system, the risk of going up against an entire monetary system that everybody just took for granted is a huge risk. But I felt that the risk of not doing it was greater, and the risk not for me of not doing it, the risk for my kids, for the world in which we live. That's why I wrote the book.
Brilliant. And so I think one of the things you just mentioned there, in particular, was when you were discussing what companies do in making products better and more efficient. I think that right there is the very definition of deflation, right? Do you want to pull on that thread a little bit?
Yeah. So innovation in a free market. If you think about innovation in a free market, you wouldn't use something. So the only way an entrepreneur wins is if they create value for society. Fair comment, right? Because why would anyone else use the service? Because that entrepreneur is competing against every other service out there. So unless an entrepreneur is creating, and I'm talking in a free market, not a manipulated market, but in a free market, nobody would use the service unless it provided more value to them. In other words, that's what drives the progress. And that necessarily, especially when you add technology to that, has to be deflationary. It has to bring prices down. I
Mhm.
can tell you, we don't in any of the companies. It's not that I'm trying to remove labor. I'm trying to drive efficiencies,
Mhm.
and those efficiencies remove labor. But if I don't drive those efficiencies, then nobody will use the service I create because somebody else will drive those efficiencies. And so all of that, if you add up what's happening on this technology base layer that is not just in your phone anymore, it's everywhere. My first company, my first company took 3 years, 2.5 years, and over $5 million to create something that Shopify gives away for about $50 a month right now, and Shopify's version is 100 times better than that.
Yep.
And so if you think about the jobs that that destroys, or what can be done on Amazon Cloud today, or Google, or anything else, if you think about what that does, it, it's just logically has to remove labor. And so I wanted to investigate why that wasn't happening, and when it should have. And when you look at the other side of that coin, so in an inflationary monetary system, if you add more debt, or if you add more credit, you can pull demand forward and grow faster. Just like if you borrowed on your house to spend more, for a while you could live beyond your means. So
Mhm.
it makes sense that so can an economy if you roll that up. And so when I looked at that, what I realized is there was over $250 trillion of global debt. This is before COVID. This is pre 2020. $250 trillion of global debt to run an $80 trillion global economy, and that it takes your breath away. It's a big number, and
I
I
mean, numbers
realized
are practically meaningless now because they're so big, right? Like it just, I think,
exactly. Remember, $1 trillion in seconds is 31,710 years,
yeah, yeah.
right? So, so when you think about, they're practically meaningless. In 2008, when there was printing of 500 billion, everybody lost their this is crazy.
Freaking out, yeah,
And now we talk about tens of trillions of dollars like it's nothing.
yeah, yeah.
So
What?
so but that's what now go that's before COVID. So $250 trillion of debt to run an $80 trillion global economy. And one could make the argument, just if you kind of looked at the look at, could it keep going? Maybe. Maybe there was a way to grow faster than that debt. And but growth would have to slow down because you'd have to tax growth faster to be able to pay back that debt. So, but maybe there was new economy, new something that could grow faster into that, and eventually pay back that debt. So I looked deeper, and then I realized that $185 trillion of the new debt was created within the last 20 years. Exactly what you would expect with exponential technology driving prices down, and a system that had to keep prices going up. So you have prices that want to go down, which if they did, would lead to broad-based society gains and not a manipulation of wealth to the highest earners. And and by preventing that from happening, you keep prices high and ever higher, while you pour money into a hole, stopping capitalism in a free market from working.
Mhm.
So now the question says, how badly are we mispricing assets right now? So if you believe so now look at your house, look at your food prices, look at everything around you, the medical expenses, everything. $185 trillion looking backwards to stop technology progress, to stop that price decline from showing up. That's looking backwards, and nobody asks, did my house? They think houses always go up, real estate always goes up. And they fail to ask, would real estate go up without $185 trillion of stimulus? And then you have to ask the next question: will real estate prices go up from here? And you get to the point that you realize the entire game, the entire thing, is just based on printing more money.
Mhm.
And if you print staggering more money, then yes, real estate prices will go up. But you need more than 185 trillion over the next 20 years, because technology is trying to drive it down faster. So now you need to exponentially increase how much debt or money printing to into that hole to be able to stop prices from going down. And so that's where we are.
Yeah, this reminds me of a conversation that Guy Swan and we had a little while back, and it actually touches on something that me and Parker Lewis spoke about. Was I think the the effect of all of this, called this deranged money printing, uh, is that, I mean, aside from, society practically tearing apart because you have some things coming down, but other things going up in price, and a complete schmozzle, I guess, for lack of a better term, of pricing signals. Like we don't price anything properly anymore. Like, plastic is, underpriced, but other things are probably overpriced. So it's like we don't know. But I think the point that Guy and I were talking about is how the world has gone towards building shit that doesn't matter because you've got capital, and we shouldn't even call it capital. We should just call it, money, because it's not real money anymore. Like this fiat money is kind of concentrating around assets that have some sort of edge. So where I'm getting to with this is three industries that come to mind, which I think are overly overly large, not because we need them to be that large, but because they're a beneficiary of money printing and capital chasing capital, are uh, banking, uh, technology, software in particular, and advertising. So, for example, I personally don't think that products like Instagram and Facebook and all this sort of stuff would, like, I don't think we would have social media on top social media on top social media in a world where capital would be allocated for innovative things that human beings need. So, for example, there's no money, or it's hard for capital to chase problems like, that are real tangible problems that we need to solve. And it reminds me of Peter Thiel when he talks about, we were promised flying cars, but we got, 160 characters. And I feel like we're building shit that doesn't matter because software is really quick and easy to scale, and you can flip, and you can pick up a lot of the cheap capital that's flowing around by listing on the Nasdaq. And you by being a publicly listed company are effectively one of the first in line, or at least the first few in line, from all of this printed capital. So things, I almost call it that meme of that Brazilian bodybuilder who pumped synthol into his biceps, and he's got these big biceps, but he's a slob in the rest of his body. And I feel like the world is like that. We've got these overdeveloped banking, financial, Wall Street, technology, useless technology companies. Like, what fucking use does TikTok have on the planet when we have all these other problems?
But let's go back to what I said before. If people are using it, it's valuable. Now, it's valuable to them. So I'm not sure if you've heard of Dunbar's.
Of course, yeah.
Dunbar and his number of power,
Yep,
150
150. Yep.
connections. There is some sociology and there's some science, early science, to suggest Facebook and the likes could increase Dunbar's number beyond 150. Now, whether we do agree or disagree on it, the point is, um, a company that provides value, it can't be used unless it provides value to somebody. That value might not be value to you. and it might be just a ridiculous value to them because it keeps them like heroin, right?
I,
They need more, they need more, they need more,
I,
because it solves a different problem for them. What they're looking for is belonging,
I
and that
agree. I agree. I don't dispute that. So sorry to interject here. I think the nuance that I'm trying to present here is that I think our perception of value has been skewed because
100%,
yeah.
100%. So if you're talking about misallocated capital and misallocated resources and everything else, which leads into perception. Oh, 100%. But and the funny thing is, it gets further and further away from it as people believe they're trying to solve belonging. They're trying to solve something else because capital is so misallocated. They're trying to
Mhm.
figure out what what's going on, right? It
I-
just doesn't feel like they're on hamster wheels, moving faster and faster and faster.
Correct.
Food prices are going up. They're seeing some people get billions and billions of dollars of wealth, and they can't keep up. And they're looking for their meditation, TikTok, a whole bunch of other things. They're searching, grasping for things.
I agree. I agree. And I
If
think
we're talking about that, then
yeah,
I totally agree.
this is what I mean. I think this is part of the derangement that happens. So I think, the fiat disease, if we can call it that, I think goes a lot deeper because you then have also the nature of incentives and the slippery slope of how incentives function is because if, you know, uh, an application or a system or a platform gains popularity because if we can sort of stem it back to some sort of deranged misallocation of capital, and it then creates a incentive for somebody else to build something similar or something of that vein, etc. And that's why I think post Facebook we've seen the rise of every sort of technically useless social media platform, but we haven't solved like real tangible problems because again we're almost, I don't know, kind of like numbed ourselves to real problems and elevated the cheap problems. So like, I don't know, it's
Well,
really
let, let,
inverted a lot of
let,
things.
let's dive a little bit into that deep, because in my book, I could only go to pull together something that could pull the whole thing. I could only go about this deep on
Mhm,
some of the
mhm.
topics.
Yep.
But if you think about how our brain is wired, what we want, what we think we want, a lot of those things are illusions, and we get those things from other people telling
Mhm.
us what and then we read more of that, and we understand and and today with technology and social science, and what imaging of the brain, they firing when your brain is firing, what you're doing, what your cravings are, and everything else. I can tell you because I'd use it, and I use it for good. I would never use it for that. But in technology companies, you can gamify design
Mhm.
to get people to do just about anything you want them to do.
Mhm.
Um, and what you're talking about is some of that, when it says it becomes super addictive, and 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 as you're down that path, you don't realize, you think it's everybody else, but it's also you. Because you're only looking at a narrow function of all of this knowledge. You don't have enough time to see all of the knowledge. By the way, even in the Bitcoin community, that happens in the Bitcoin community. What I do love about the Bitcoin community is people hold each other to task,
Mhm.
and but they do, even people that like each other
Yeah. Yeah.
hold
Yeah.
each other to task when
Very-
they're off. So there's really critical thinking. But I do like it when somebody's coming in from outside with a really credible, where could this go wrong? Because if you actually looking at the other side of an issue, and you're trying to poke holes at any sort of debate, you should know the other person's side of their debate better than you know your own. That's what doesn't happen in social media. That's what people just jump on, and it's so thin, but they don't know it. They're deluded
Well,
because
yeah, we buy into these surface levels of ideologies. Actually, when I was younger, I spent quite a bit of time studying psychology, and me and my friend, we used to do these random experiments where we would go knock on doors, and we studied NLP when we were younger, so neuro linguistic programming, and
Yeah.
we'd create these scripts where we'd actually knock on a fucking stranger's door, and we'd actually ask them to give us money. And we had about a 20% hit rate. 20% of people, like we'd use kind of like a hypnotic script, and someone would just like randomly pull their wallet out, just give us $5 or $10. It was like wild. And we did one experiment once when we were in quite a busy city in Sydney, and we gathered like 4 or 5 of us, and we said, all right, let's see if we can get people to the whole fucking street to run in a direction. And I started running, and then he started running, and then the other one, and we actually got a whole street, a couple hundred people, just to run for absolutely no reason.
Yeah. But I completely buy it. It's crazy.
And I think this is sort of this is, I guess, in many ways, this is I guess it's a bug and a feature of humanity in a sense, is that it's survival instinct, which is like, if you're too slow to react to some form of danger, you end up being the dead one. But because it's a survival instinct, you throw rationality and critical thinking out the window, because you need to.
I think it's more than that. Again, I touched a tiny bit on this in my book. It's energy. It comes down to your brain's energy. It's easier to, if you can't go a deep dive, critical think everything.
Yes.
So what ends up happening is you have a base level of knowledge that the world forms to, and you keep on adding things to that base level of knowledge. What's happening today in an inflationary monetary system that is everybody's base level of knowledge, everything sits on top of that, is colliding against technology moving the other way. And and people are wanting to try to defend the existing system because they don't know. So so MMT,
Mm-hmm.
which is such a crazy thing. It's been tried before, right? It's such a crazy thing. But I understand why people think it'll work, and I understand why people think it'll, in the short term, it probably will. It means concentrating power in government and removing the free market. But
Mm-hmm.
I understand why that looks a lot more popular than what I would say, because it sits on top of everybody's base frame of reference.
Okay, so can you describe this base frame of reference a little bit? What are some of the beliefs or ideas or mental models in this base frame of reference, so we can understand this persona of the average?
Well, let's use that inflationary. I grew up thinking inflation was good.
Mhm.
Every year, the Fed keeps coming out and saying we're trying to get to our 2% inflation target. We're doing
Mhm.
everything we can. Nobody ever asks, is inflation good?
Mhm.
Is my money getting worth less each year? Good,
Mhm.
because it's your base for it. And so, by the way, writing the book for me, I had to challenge a whole bunch of
Yeah,
these
imagine.
beliefs and really challenge them. And again, they take critical thinking, and they take things that you have to pull into your view and discuss them at a level, and then and really question, because you don't want to believe them. It's it, it's so if you want to just want, you go through school, your parents grew up, they got wages increases, their houses went up in price. It was the way the world worked, and there was a whole bunch of people that benefited from that, and a whole bunch of people that lost out of that on that. And actually, we wouldn't have seen it as fast. It could have kept going. It wasn't just 1971 off the gold standard. Some of this is all, but it could have kept going for a lot longer if technology didn't change everything. Just like Blockbuster could have kept going for a long time if technology didn't change download speeds.
Mhm. Mhm.
And those things change everything in an instant. And it's already changed, but most people, our minds don't change that fast. That's the problem.
Okay, so 100% agree with that. So one mental model is because you'll see where I'm going with this. I'm kind of trying to cut a path to, I think, one thing where where I kind of get a little bit frustrated, not just with uh, the Bitcoin space, but just more maybe broadly, is I think the almost the naive idea that there's a grand puppeteer or some sort of conspiracy running all of this. And look, I think, I mean, things like
There
the
is.
great things like the Great Reset challenge that in some ways, because that seems so blatantly like you know puppeteery. But I also don't like to give too much credit to uh, call it statists and deranged central planners, because I don't think they can do things so smoothly and so well. Like, I think conspiracies are much harder to run. I think they're very simplistic views.
I
Um,
love that you said that. Now there is absolutely, if you looked at the Bilderberg group, if you looked at, and when multiple leaders come out and talk about a great reset, realize, oh my God, right? There's something, but it's not. They're just lost. They're just lost the exact same way that any business that faces a technology change and then renders everything they're doing useless. They're just completely lost, and they're trying to figure out how to. And but again, those people, why would they be any? Do you think somebody sits on top of the whole world and says, "I know better for everything"? They're just as lost in this. It's a staggering change. It
yeah,
is a staggering change to come up against the technology that's moving this fast.
I 100% agree. So I think this is where I want to dig into and maybe develop some of these personas, because I think in my piece that I wrote for the Bitcoin Times, I talked about, I don't know if you had a chance to read it yet, but like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so utopian dystopias, right? It's I think we end up in very bad places. It's that classic saying, right? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I
Yep.
think now, whilst some people's intentions may not be good, like I saw that Canadian minister lady who, and maybe even her intention, you could argue, is good in some way, but, saying that, we should dip into people's savings. I was like, whoa. But hey, who knows? Maybe the intention comes from somewhere pure, not that the action does. But I think a lot of the the messiness or the lostness that you just mentioned, or the confusion that happens in the world, is just this it comes from like naivete or ignorance or arrogance of almost reality. And like you said, that probably is spawned from these base frame of references that have not been questioned, like inflation being one of them. What are some more of these? I really want to establish what these beliefs are that are unquestioned, that
It could
lead somebody to think like this.
it could be anything. And why I say that is so yeah, there's the big ones. Capitalism would be another one. Free market democracies, everything else, especially when those are being abused. Right? That people haven't seen a really free market and everything right now, and it's being abused. They will race for socialism.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, but but it could be anything. It could be what we talked about before when we were recording the show. It could be wearing a mask. It could be. Um, I'll tell you this. Some of the stuff that if I put on Twitter or everything else, you have to be pretty stoic in your response. You have to realize, okay, I put out something recently because I actually believe that now, not that the other inventions didn't get us here, but I actually believe Bitcoin could be humanity's greatest invention. Right? And I wouldn't have put it on Twitter unless I did believe that, because it fixes so many other things. I
Hmm.
know we talk about it. I know Bitcoin community talks about it. There's so many things that it's a forcing function to fix
Yes.
if done the right way, and putting kind of freedom into people's hands. I believe that. I could not believe the 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 response from, because it was put on CNBC and it was put on, and almost the whole left, that really left, what came out, And you almost have to, at first you're taken back. The people that are most hurt, the people that are, I'm not hurt at all by the existing policies. I'm helped by the existing
Mhm,
policies.
mhm, mhm.
The, I have way more than I need, and everything keeps going up faster and faster because of more printing. I'm one of the beneficiaries. I cannot believe that the people most hurt,
Are the most
that are
again?
getting
Yeah,
crucified,
yeah,
are coming at me like that.
yeah.
And I say I can't believe that. You just have to, again, have stoicism. You have to realize, okay, they are so blind. They are so into, they listen to the same stuff all the time. They think free money just can grow it on trees and give it to you without a consequence, without somebody being hurt from that. And so so they'll do anything to protect that belief.
Yeah, I think I that's one of the, I think if 2020 has shown me anything, is basically a macro version of, that micro event, right? It's the people who are at, the most risk, that are the most it's like the whole leftists who go out and, parade for people's rights and liberty, then go and parade to lock everyone down. It's like, it's just so wild, the level of hypocrisy. And again,
The cognitive dissonance
yes.
of what it is. But but again, having I'm super fortunate. Friends like a mile wide that I would do anything for, that they would do anything for me. And those, for some of those friends, we disagree passionately on issues. And this issue here, and everything else, but they're still really great friends.
Mhm.
So I understand totally why somebody could feel this way if that's all they're reading, if they haven't looked deeper on this. And but I'm just as likely to have the same mistakes and the same errors and in my thinking. So I do I'm careful. I'm careful to, when somebody brings something into view, or I look for the alternative response, so that I know so that I know where that goes, so that so that I don't get trapped. Because in a world like this, where we all kind of, it's easier to be around in Bitcoin. Let's use Bitcoin. It's easier to be around people you like. It's easier around that share your views. It's just easier. So it's a natural thing to have people tell you they like you and you want to do more and stay there. So if it's natural for us, wouldn't it be natural for somebody else on the other side where they might not see any of this? That's and might we get caught in the same thing. So I try to make sure I'm looking at all sides of issues.
I think you're one of the ones who do that a lot better. I think I need more practice in stoicism, because I get fired up very, very easily, I think. But I think that's probably also uh, immaturity on my part, because, I'm quite a bit younger.
So
And
Alex, this might be helpful for you or anybody else that's listening. It is not what somebody says to you that fires you up. It is your reaction of what you think it means about you.
yeah, yep,
It has nothing to do with what they say. Zero.
yep,
Because if you like, it shouldn't even flag. It shouldn't even anything.
yep.
It's either untrue. They could say it all day long, and you could turn them off. Or, but so it's always our reaction to a circumstance, what we think it means to us, that gets us fired up.
Hmm. I I 100% agree. I think, well, that's a tricky one for me, though, because, see, I've gone through phases of being non-reactive to things like that, in the sense that, I know they're wrong. It's kind of like someone coming up and saying, you have purple eyes, you have purple eyes. It's like, well, Okay, no worries. Tony Robbins uses that example of like, it's all communication requires both a sender and a receiver. And
Yeah.
people can send whatever they want, but it depends what you want to receive, right? So I 100% agree with that. I think recently it's probably a mixture of the the addictive nature or the reactive nature of Twitter, number one, but also two, I think I just have a really deep caring, which at times, because I care about the consequences of uh, naive thinking, or thinking that that can lead to dangerous outcomes. When like whether it's people raging on about equality without understanding the second, third, fourth order effects of what that actually does to society, etc. So I definitely need to learn to better temper my responses. So maybe I guess the nuance there is I need to be better at responding as opposed to just blindly reacting with fucking rage, which is
I'm not saying it's not it's easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but again, it's nothing that there you have people that haven't done the work,
mm,
and a lot of people. And by the way, if they haven't done the work, responding with rage will just create more of a tension, and they won't do the work. They'll take
uh,
it right.
yeah,
And so I just treat it as a game. Okay, I'm going to play the game if I have time. I don't have time to spend on Twitter all the time,
yep,
but if I spend, if I the other night on this one, I just treated it as a game. My wife's on Netflix. I didn't want to watch what she was watching.
yep,
It was a Sunday, and okay, I'll play the game a little while.
yep, 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 yep. Question. I think let me phrase it as a statement, and then
Yeah,
we'll follow a question. So I have been on the personal agency and personal responsibility bandwagon for a long time, and I think that was a result of me uh, having a rough childhood and then sort of leaving home at a very young age, and sort of having to rely on myself. And I think entrepreneurs are people who are genuinely self-sufficient. They're innovators, they're creators, they're I think if there was one thing, like I'm not a big fan of Robert Kiyosaki, but if there was one thing that I really took from his book when I was a 15, 16-year-old kid reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, was his chapter about working for no money, and learning so there was that, and then there was also the working and not having a guaranteed paycheck. And I think that for me is what really has driven me, because I've never personally had a job. I've never had a constant paycheck. I never knew what that felt like all throughout my life. I started my first thing that was a closest thing to a job, but I was a sole trader, a sole contractor. Was I was knocking on doors, selling pay television door to door. I didn't even have a TV. I had no idea what the fuck was on the TV, but I kind of I found my way, and it was pure commission based work. You didn't sell, you didn't eat, and that sort of taught me, I think, from a young age, the importance of personal agency and responsibility in it. And I think for me, falling down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, that idea of personal agency and responsibility has really, like, of all things, has aligned with me. And I think I wrote it in my piece. I said Bitcoin is the renaissance of responsibility. Would you agree with the idea that a, one of the central pieces of why the world has, in a sense, deranged so much is because of the remove the I guess the consistent removal of personal agency and responsibility, whether through schooling, through media, through politics, through everything. I feel like that's probably the biggest. I think it started off as as an intention to provide product services, the state as a service, but is deranged into this uh, almost like a snowball towards the complete removal of the individual's right or capacity to decide. It's a long
so
question.
yeah, probably simply. if I just had to answer in one word, yes. It's way it's way more nuanced than that, and so I think about this: the who do I want to aspire to, and or what are the things that actually provide best life for me? What I've kind of consolidated on is I'm I'm a really great learner. I am so curious about so many things, and I learn all. That's what I just love it. Not just learning kind of how to get wealthy, or not just learning how to create a business, but how to be a better dad, how to be a better. And so what do I do in learning? I learn from anyone. So it's not people just that are smarter than me, or in a different business, or people that are above the social economic ladder. Anyone below, sideways, anybody. And I read a lot. Since I was 19 years old, I read about 50 books a year. And it gives me an edge. But more than that, and this ties exactly to what you're talking about, and this is why it's so important. I try to teach my kids the same thing. How do you learn in your everyday life? And and you, every time you say it's somebody else's fault, you will never pull into the learning that you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's for me, it's always my fault. It's always me. Not or my reaction to something. It's always and this is what you learn in creating businesses and everything else, and you know because you read my book. I, my business, which was worth $500 million, and I had $100 million of that business, I walked away with zero. So because I would not take a bribe from somebody that wanted to give me more of the company and wipe out my shareholders. That's only 3.5 years ago. I walked away from zero from a business that I created for 20 years, but I walked away with my integrity. The money came back in an instant. How fast created more wealth and everything else. That was, but I, but again, instead of blaming somebody else for my circumstances, and I would have, if I blamed him for stopping that company's success or everything he did to do that, I would have been stuck there still today. Oh, woe is me.
Mm-hmm.
I put the debt in the company. It was my fault. Yes, he played a game, everything else, but I made the mistake. It was me, and that allowed me to learn that mistake and supercharge everything else. So I totally agree with you. But every time you say it's somebody else's fault, or it's their you refuse to, you don't have to learn, you don't have to see the things that you need to learn. If you pull it in that it's me, you learn faster.
I think that's a beautiful example of the importance of responsibility. Again, it's whether it's learning, whether it's your example earlier, actually, the responsibility of responding instead of reacting. I think, what we were discussing earlier, and remaining stoic, the responsibility of receiving what, the communication somebody else is sending and how you, react to that. I think they're all examples that I don't know. I think for me,
So just before you go here, they came at a high price. All of these learnings, right?
yes,
To pretend that I always had what I have today would be, if you saw the entrepreneur I was when I was 20 years old and started business, and how ignorant I was for so
mhm,
many things, and how many mistakes I made. It's just, if you actually take accountability every single time, you learn faster.
yeah, 100%. Yes, I think this is this is again what I think drives me crazy about society these days. In many cases, is like we've created such a blame and cancel culture. Everything is somebody else's fault. Everything is you know this person did that, and this is why everything is fucked up. Instead of quote unquote manning up and actually claiming responsibility, or claiming your innate ability to do something about it. So I think, I mean, Jordan Peterson obviously talks a lot about this. I think I learned a lot from Tony Robbins in the younger years when I was when I was a punk 20-year-old kid, and I think he really instilled the importance of responsibility. I mean, even NLP, when you look at that, this is why I think it's probably the most functional of all psychology. Is NLP at its very core talks about, are you at cause or are you at effect? And it literally, the whole study is about positioning yourself at cause, or when you're dealing with someone and helping them through a therapy, is to position them at cause, because it's their ability to give it meaning that that matters, not the event itself, not what somebody else did, not what happened. None of that shit matters. It's your response to it. And that aligns with Viktor Frankl's work, with Alfred Adler, and all of that sort of stuff. So I see this strong theme of agency and responsibility, and I think that's one of the dangers. Like, if I tie this back into your article, actually, is you talk about these two different scenarios of if the world goes one way versus the other. And I think the MMT, the path that we're on at the moment, absent Bitcoin, is a world where responsibility becomes completely absolved, and no one has responsibility at the individual level, but some, like, responsibility and agency is sort of given up, and
So
something
yeah,
else, someone else.
so that path, you better trust benevolent dictators because you've given away all your freedom. That's
Correct.
actually that's actually why I said that path leads to that. Now there's a couple things in any article you can't put, unless it's kind of a book. You miss you miss things. You can't put it all down. So I'll tell you a couple of things that aren't in that article. So we could be on the MMT path, and the existing infrastructure could say, to retain power, let it all collapse, right? Go into a deflationary depression, and then out after that, go be just before everything's destroyed. Now put some money in, now try to keep it going. That could be a that could be a great reset. That is an edge case great reset that that resets banks and everything else that I didn't talk about in that book, or sorry, in that paper.
Mhm.
So I talked about the existing path, what's the next steps, and next steps, next steps. But anything along there, imagine if governments stopped. And then after this massive dip, people on the street can't eat, prices collapse, everything else, then came back in. Be a different reset. And that itself would be bad for, probably bad for Bitcoin in the short term. Not bad for Bitcoin in the long term, but bad for Bitcoin in the short term. And it could happen.
Describe that a bit further. So what governments do? What, they stop printing money,
Yeah,
you mean?
so let's say the U.S. Does this stimulus, then they stop. Everything stopped. What would happen? Just you think about that unwind.
Mm-hmm.
Every asset price would collapse. Banks would start collapsing. You'd have a brakes on the world, and you would have to a complete debt unwind and everything else, and then inject on the other side.
What does the other side look like? So what do you
I
define?
don't know. So that's, you would have to time that so well, and you might not, like, because there'd be uprisings, bank collapse, everything else. But what I'm getting at is, in the 30s, you had some of that, and new politicians elected, and then printing money. So we had a debt wipeout, and then reinflating.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
And I don't, so, and even that thought, I haven't gone deep dive into that thought, but I just like I said before, I try to say, where could this thesis be wrong, and poke
Mhm.
holes in the thesis where it is, because nothing works exactly like you said. The book laid out kind of everything that's happening, But in something with there's so many different edge cases, which happening with the Chinese with the yuan and the Belt and Road, like this is a geopolitical game across the world, and lots of different things moving all the time. So I just like to look at all, where are those edge cases? What might I miss? What would I do in that event?
While we're here, so we touched on that scenario then. So let's can you talk through, for those who haven't read the article itself, the other two scenarios, the ones that you actually wrote about, and let's take people through a journey of what they look like.
So the existing monetary system cannot work with technology moving as fast as it's moving. So it will break. It's already way past the point of rescue. So the debt can't be repaid, and we're adding more and more debt. And it's not just debt; we're socializing the losses to try to get inflation up.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next step of all of those is because that's going to continue as it sets up today. The Fed lending to banks, so the banks will lend to the greater economy. Cannot get the money, can't get M2 to move up because there is no greater economy. You have to have to drive actual inflation. So actually, that's more deflationary. You're having all this. It's just running into asset price inflation and everything else. But in the greater economy, you don't have. Tell me how people are going to get paid higher. You don't have wage pressures getting paid higher and higher because all of that is actually more misallocation of capital. Tell me the giant industries that are going to replace the ones that are changing.
Yes. So in a sense, just to clarify for the listeners there, then what's happening is the money's coming from the Fed to the banks, and it's kind of getting maybe into Wall Street and hedge funds and big guys, but it's not then going into Main Street, right?
Yeah, it's not getting into company formation, economy growing, everything else. It's propping up asset prices. In fact, just a really simple view would be this: what do you think commercial real estate would be priced if it was allowed to fall? Nobody's in their commercial real estate. We are on this. Right? Everybody is locked down all over the world. So should commercial real estate be priced higher than it was before 2020? It's insane.
Insane.
All of the money is going in to prop up those prices, and then asking the economy to pay prices that are already too high, that are already high. So these prices just keep going higher, and then we need more money that we don't have to pay other people to be able to keep those prices. That is not a functioning economy. That is not good growth and productive growth that delivers higher living standards. That's manipulating capitalism. So that's what's happening. So the next step out of that, you can expect effectively the Treasury to become the Fed. So government's going to get in control of the window, and you're going to see fiscal stimulus, MMT, helicopter money to try to get money into people's hands. Mm-hmm. And you're going to get government reaching into more businesses and saying that industry is one we want to global green energy. That is one we're going to make sure works. You're going to pour tons of money into these industries, and at some point, with enough of that money, you could potentially be that could be very inflationary if it gets into society at some point. But you can never turn it off. You have to, because now today governments have the debt. So how would they ever raise interest rates? The minute they raise interest rates, remember in 1981 when Volcker, it took interest rates up to 19-20% to stop inflation, and that was set up by going off the gold reserve, driving monetary stimulus, and everybody did the same thing. But most of that debt at that time was held in the broader economy. My parents went to zero in that time. because they had houses and everything else, and then nothing carried itself at those rates. So you had inflation that made the debt payable, and so you paid back the debt in cheaper dollars tomorrow. You drove higher inflation, and then you crammed on the brakes, and you put the world in a depression or a recession, and then you could go again. It hurt a lot of people. It hurt a lot of people. People were wiped out. Today, it's not people that own that debt; it's government itself. So
Mhm.
how does that ever? How do you ever slow down that economy by taking rates up? Rates in this existing world are going down lower and lower and lower into central bank digital currencies that'll be negative, so that you can be taxed in an instant, and consolidating more power into government control, which will be a one-way ticket to the removal of free markets, democracy, everything else. It puts the state in control of everything. That's without Bitcoin. And Bitcoin on the other side is
Before we jump into the Bitcoin thing, so to clarify this path, and again, it's a path. You know, Jeff is not a clairvoyant, so he doesn't know exactly what's going to happen here. But we're saying at the moment, money is sort of just staying. It's purely inflating assets, so it's not getting to Main Street and to the people. So the solution to that is going to be, instead of the central bank pumping money into the banks and their cronies and Wall Street effectively, government's going to try and mandate or even pick up the function of distributing that money directly to people. And this is effectively what MMT is in some sense.
yeah, because you think, in fact, by doing this, you drive socialism.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
You hold up the prices really high. There's a whole bunch of people who can't pay for those prices. Those people think it's all the capitalism, when it isn't capitalism at all, or free market at all. It's manipulating capitalism. It's crony capitalism. So
yep.
you hold up prices. Those people can't eat. They can't pay their families. They look for they look for people to blame.
Yes.
And there's lots of people that will point at all the people with money and say it's their fault.
Yep. So that's where the political pressure comes then to make this
The
change,
political
right?
pressure comes say, okay, I'm going to give you money.
Yep.
Now, think about this from a first principles standpoint. Even if they do, even if they get away with it and cause inflation, inflation means real wages going down.
Yep.
Right? That's what it means. So as prices go up, then people's ability to pay for those prices are going down, because their wages aren't going up as fast as the inflation rate. And so what's happening is you're stimulating here wages, savings are going down in fiat currencies. So, and those same people are coming to government saying, yep, we need more inflation. Can you give me some money to make it worse?
Mm-hmm. Do you think, as money starts getting helicoptered, dropped directly to people, do you think uh, wages will rise in lockstep with inflation, and we end up in some sort of no?
No, never happens. Never happens. Inflation is a
Even if
gift.
the money is direct to people, though.
Doesn't matter. So what are the people going to spend it on? They're going to spend it on their housing. They're going to spend it on food. They're going to spend it on businesses and everything else. Inflation is a gift to the rich.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you think that
Your wages don't they never go up as fast as inflation.
Mhm. So you think it's just the flywheel? It's just going to keep getting away, right? So then the checks that the government's going to have to cut are going to have to get higher and higher and higher, right?
It again, going way back to the principles of my book and everything else. You have technology that's driving prices down everywhere. That technology is removing labor. Yet it is inconsistent. It's incompatible with a system that's trying to make prices go up. doesn't matter what you do, everything else. So why I could see this, why my portfolio is just super well positioned, everything else is I wrote about it. If you understood what was happening, you can see what all the next steps have to be.
Yep.
Have and so it's really logical what the next steps are going to be, and what you talked about before, second, third, fourth order effects of those steps are normally this is reset through wars.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
This is normally a reset through wars.
Mm.
One other thing that I didn't point out in the article, and I realized when I was talking to a bunch of people called me on it, is not called. They called me to talk about it, but they, when I talked about the 10x change in Bitcoin to the existing monitor, it's Bitcoin to gold.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And that's what you look for, and I look for in technology companies that have an opportunity to try 10 times better advantage than the existing market incumbent, because to try to be seen in today's world, if you don't have a 10 times advantage, the marketing costs, you'll never get there.
Correct.
So a lot of people took that and they took one side of that argument. They took the 10x advantage into the existing monetary stuff. What they missed is the other side of the argument. You could take every other crypto asset. They're competing to try to get 10x on Bitcoin. And I don't see it. I don't see any of them having
That's a very
and so, but again, it probably, so because Bitcoin is there, already has this dynamic of a network effect driving, you have to beat that by 10 times. And I see it as highly unlikely. Not in the short term. People are going to create a whole bunch of short term up and down and everything else, but I just don't see it in the long term.
Yeah.
I'll look, I'll watch, I'll investigate if something actually has that, but I haven't seen any.
I would concur. I think that's actually a good way to position it for people, because I mean, me and everyone who's listening to this knows my position on Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin's achieved a 10 out of 10 on every attribute of money anyway. The scarcity function, the fungibility function, the divisibility function, the portability function, the durability, like the attributes and the functions that money needs in order to be money. Bitcoin is a 10 out of 10 on all of them anyway. So I think layering that realization with your point that it has to be 10 times better than that. How do you get 10 times better than 10 out of 10? It's impossible. And
the other side of 10 times better is you could tie it into the broader economy, right? And so that's actually where kind of another edge case, if central bank digital currencies could get it around faster, could they tie it into a broader economy that looks something like Bitcoin? They'll never do that. But if you said, could they create something that looked like Bitcoin and tie it into the greater economy faster than regulate it broadly, worldly, into the greater economy faster than Bitcoin could, they could try it. I think that is such, it's almost insignificant.
And that was the Libra promise, right? That was the original,
So now they're up against exactly. Now think about what they're up against. They're up against a whole bunch of nation states that all want the same thing and all want to manipulate their own currency for their own gain in a world that doesn't trust each other.
Yep.
Good luck. Good luck. And so what's happening, and again, I couldn't put this all in the article, and people in Bitcoin know how fast layer 2 and lightning network and what is happening there, the innovation in this, how fast this is going to be a payment layer as well. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I gave a talk in 2019 called "Blockchain is Dead. The Future is on Lightning," and I'll link it in on this podcast. But I discussed how, I remember one of my slides was blockchainers are arguing about 10,000 transactions per second, when Bitcoin's infrastructure and the ability to create off-chain scaling enables potentially billions of transactions per second, because it's able to move throughput to another chain. So like, and the example that I used was, MasterCard and Visa, they sort of bottleneck themselves at 100, 150,000 transactions per second because they are central. But Bitcoin, and with the Lightning kind of infrastructure, you have the ability to have everyone be a payment processor. So when you multiply that out, you're talking orders of magnitude of higher throughput. So there is nothing that any blockchain or Tangle or fucking Mesh or whatever, other fancy payment layer network they discuss, it's not going to compete with something that has a base layer where you can abstract throughput and make everybody a node. That is impossible to compete with.
That's what I believe too. Not that I wouldn't look, not that I wouldn't, but if you think about what innovation has to happen to be able to make it something else, well concurrently, how fast the innovation is happening on Bitcoin seems pretty illogical.
It's, yeah. I mean, I feel sorry for anyone who's still stuck in the old narratives for shitcoins, and whether it's XRP or anything else. It's deranged. So anyway, let's come back to these pathways. So that pathway number one ends up. Jesus, that's a loud cicada.
Wow. Wow.
Wild. Anyway, so path number one, we end up in MMT, we end up in helicopter money, we end up with runaway inflation because wages will never catch up. It becomes this sort of flywheel effect.
Yeah, at some point you get an inflate. Now, I think actually that point is a long way away.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because the amount of money to start to actually bring that inflation rate up against what's happening with technology.
Mm-hmm.
What would a technology company do seeing that? You'd drive labor out of your company as fast as you could. So every technology company today, labor is mobile and it's around the world now. I have a technology company in India that it's like it's in my backyard, and you're going to get the best talent no matter where that talent lives if that talent can work from home. And and this is what happens with Bitcoin too. It's borderless. You cannot stop that from happening. If you're a nation state, it's not like they just, okay, here I'm going to put this line down this border, and you can't hire somebody from somebody else. It's impossible to stop. I was doing a House of Commons thing with the Canadian government. They asked me to speak, and the irony of us doing a Zoom call when there's no jobs from Zoom in the House of Commons in Canada. And I know Eric, the CEO of Zoom, I know well. He's a great guy. But yep. The irony of us using a technology in the Canadian Parliament that there isn't a job in Canada. Well, they're talking about protecting jobs in Canada. It's just lost on me.
That cognitive dissonance again.
Yeah.
So at some point we get runaway inflation. Then what happens? Like, is that the precursor potentially to the hyperinflation that everyone keeps saying is coming next year, or what happens beyond that?
I care way more about what happens to our political systems and what ends up happening in when you have this sort of distortion of money in the world. People think it's their wealth and everything else. What really happens is that's why it always leads to war and dictatorship. It always does. Go through history. That it always leads to a whole bunch of people disenfranchised, electing somebody to be able to say it's their fault, and it consolidates power faster. Um, that path is a very, very scary path for our world,
Mm.
because once you have once you do that in a country, you need a bigger enemy, and so the enemy has to be outside your country. And so if you see the geopolitical games and the chessboard being played out right now around the world, that's what it looks
What about the whole, you know, WEF, global government kind of scenario? Like, do you think that, you know, there's at that point where you end up with runaway inflation everywhere? Because I mean, at the end of the day, every single country is so far up shit creek without a paddle at the moment. They're all going to end up doing the same MMT helicopter drops. That none of them have an option. Like my parents are from Macedonia, for example, and I know like that country was broke before any of this Corona garbage came up, and they're completely fucking broke now. Like so every single one of these countries, nation states, and everything is going to have to do the same thing now. As and obviously it's going to happen at different rates in different places, but as that uh, inefficacy of MMT and helicopter money begins to take hold and stuff begins to run away, do you think there's a push for some sort of attempt for a global government? Do you think that's a reality, or do you think that's still like a pipe dream?
like. I think if you looked at a conspiracy theory type of thing, that's what you would see. And I think there might even be kind of uh, that might have been in Keynes' idea, moving into something like that. It's a better way to look what China is doing right now with the Belt and Road. If you can get somebody to, if you can create money out of nothing, get Africa to take that money
Mm-hmm.
and then pay you back in interest, you own them without owning them.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
There's no war, no anything else. You own them. But the problem with that whole game is people. It's not the 30s anymore. It's not 1900 now. Communication moves too fast. The internet moves too fast. Everybody know. Not everybody. Very few people know what's happening, but enough people know what's happening to realize we're not playing this game.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have populations on one side. As you play that game, you're you're hurting tons of a population, and they're rising up. You have Bitcoin as a release valve for a whole bunch of people that have looked into this deeper and saying we're not playing this game anymore. And so as Bitcoin gets as a network effect builds for Bitcoin and it gets more and more trust, it destroys this game absolutely unequivocally.
It does. It does, 100%. But I'm
And
thinking in the absence of Bitcoin here, like
in the absence of Bitcoin, there would be a World War III.
yeah, okay, interesting. Because see, I've always thought that World War III was unlikely because the game theory around it is is a little bit too touch and go now. Like in World War II, you know, we're still, you know, practically and technologically speaking, particularly in comparison today, we're throwing sticks and stones at each other. Really, like now, I think you know, when you think about, you know, biological warfare, when you think about, you know, I mean, nuclear
So
warfare.
World War III would look very different than World War II. That's
Yeah.
so if you think about drones, biological, if you think about all of the different technology, if you think about what you could do infiltrating somebody's technology network, power grid, everything else,
I mean, you've
World
got
War III
for their supply chain. You knock out the supply chain, you starve the whole fucking thing. So that's why I don't know whether World War III is as realistic. You know, or
I'm
maybe.
just saying I'm just saying it looks like that, but
Mhm.
it doesn't. Our brains say, okay, it's tanks on a field and everything
Mm,
else.
mm,
It's
mm.
like that, but for people around the world, it'll feel like that. There's starvation, death, everything else, just a different way.
Mhm. Do you think in that kind of environment, a push for some sort of global government makes sense or no? Do you think that might be one of the things that would be tried to pull? Again, we're talking a hypothetical in the absence of Bitcoin.
In the absence of Bitcoin, maybe,
Hmm.
because in the absence of Bitcoin, what you would find is you people want to listen to somebody that has all the answers, and that would sound like, okay, here's a really great answer to pull the world together. And in the absence of it, you might get that. I'm not going to say who, but somebody in a major media, an editor in chief in major media, called me a week before Christmas, and he said, "I read your book last year. I gave it to top minds around, and everybody agreed with everything you had in it, but said we have to keep printing."
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, and what I realized is we as a paper are not doing our job because we keep going to the same people in power because we expect them to be able to solve this,
Mm-hmm.
but they can't. It's unsolvable over the existing system, and nobody in the existing system can solve it. They think they can, but it's the same. That's why I try not to, use these examples about net or Blockbuster putting candy aisles in their stores.
Yeah.
Not, right, and people laugh, and I laugh, and everything else. But at the time, they didn't see how fast technology was moving, and download speeds rendered their entire business obsolete in a couple of years. They didn't see it. So why, if you actually knew the executives at Blockbuster and 9,000 stores and all their attendant costs and everything else, and now imagine one of them is a friend, and they're saying, and all they did is missed how fast technology is moving, and now they can't do anything. And what could you tell them? That is where the existing system is today.
Mm-hmm.
And people think it's this person on top of the thing trying. Like, I sure wouldn't want to be Powell right now. There's nothing he can do. There is nothing any. It's not bad people. They're just completely stuck into a system that cannot work. It's incongruent with how fast technology is moving, and so what ends up happening is, that's why I compare these things to businesses, because I see it all the time in businesses. The natural order of thing in the business is to protect their turf and not advance technology, because they can't see how fast technology is moving. They can't see. Most people, even on this call, would have no idea, or watching this would have no idea the pace that Lightning Network is moving, the pace that this is moving. It's almost incomprehensible that how fast entrepreneurs are racing into this and what's happening. So you don't see it until it's into the market.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not widely in the market yet. Jack Mahler's company is early. There's others. You can imagine what Square is going to do in this. It's going to move very, very fast, but it's hard to see right now. And people look backwards, not forwards, in projecting growth. They think linearly.
Yep.
So it's just being a technology executive and seeing this play out hundreds of times, different companies, different everything else. It is the natural order, and it's not bad people. It's just they're trying to protect a system that's unprotectable.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, again, whilst agreeing with you, I think, I think good and bad people is a tough one, because I do think some people, are naive enough. I mean, you've got your Chuck Schumers out there who, adamantly want to maintain the power of the US dollar, and I'm pretty sure they know, the ramifications of that. But I think their intent is to, whatever their intent might be. I don't think we can paint everyone as a good actor.
Or there's another question. When you're in this, when you're in this, you get a whole bunch of people out for personal gain.
Yeah.
The closer you are to government, the closer that you are to everything, you can make a lot of money. The closer you're to the banking sector, you can make a lot of money. It's those types of things that, as that happens, that destroy confidence in any free market or any fairness, that makes the whole thing unwind faster.
It's sort of like I guess you could compare them to vultures, right? So when the economy has become this carcass, and the kind of person that's going to fly in and try and extract from that as much as they can is that kind of persona, and we've seen that happen in every single collapse, whether it was Zimbabwe, Weimar
Well,
Germany, all of that.
and on the other side, it would look exactly the same, just a different face. That's
Correct.
why you can't change the system has to be fair, and the system has to be um, the incentives of the system have to be fair to provide the best outcomes. And the incentives of the systems are not designed that way today because it's incompatible with a deflationary technology that's deflationary.
I would argue that even if technology wasn't as deflationary as it is, I still think it would be incompatible, maybe just able to be extended a little bit longer.
So we wouldn't see it. What would happen is we wouldn't see it as fast.
Yeah, maybe
And
not in a single lifetime.
what,
Yeah.
what would happen is they could get away before this happened. They could have got away with another 1981,
Mhm,
wiped out a whole bunch of
mhm,
people.
mhm.
People that really knew what was going on could get in and out at the right time.
Yeah, yeah.
But you could play that game multiple times over, and no one would see it because it was happening too slowly. Now it's happening at a rate that's just
Yeah, interesting. So technology becomes like a magnifier and an exponential magnifier at that.
that. That's why you see 185 trillion dollars over the last 20 years.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
exponentially, and now more and more people it's becoming into people's view, and then that was before. Remember, that was before 2020. Think about what's happening now around the world. It just makes that look like child's play.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that reminds me almost of just the notion of fragility. I think the system was so fragile already. Or this little thing that happened has kind of spiraled it completely out of control. It reminds me of, I did stunt driving when I was a bit younger, in my mid 20s, and one of the first things we were taught was when you're losing control in a car. Well, actually, I might even ask this as a question. Let's say you start losing control in a car. What's the first thing you should do?
Zoom out, or let go of the wheel probably, or loosen your grip on the wheel.
Let go of the wheel is exactly what you have to do. So, and it sounds so counterintuitive, but as in a car that's losing control, as you touch the wheel, you actually make the car lose more and more
Yeah,
control. And this is where a lot of accidents actually occur. Is first thing you do is you let go of the wheel, you let go of the accelerator, and you do not touch the brake. And it's just, as human beings, we, and I think this is the notion, this is the fallacy of the central planner and the Keynesian thinker and the statist, is that this notion that you can somehow control and plan from the center, where in reality, innovation, life, technology, uh, you know, advancement all happens at the edge. It happens in a decentralized fashion uh, by nature, and I think this aberration that we can somehow control this, and this is why I always used to laugh at Ray Dalio when he used to talk about, the beautiful deleveraging. I was like, there is no beautiful deleveraging coming, because the
we should
forces
we
that
should spend
play.
a moment. We should spend a moment on that because, funny enough, like a lot of people would, and without technology, he could probably get away with that. That's what happened in '81.
Mm, mm,
That the that you could probably get away with that. With technology, like you're right. There is no beautiful deleveraging coming. It's ridiculous to think so. But in a in, Ray's a smart guy, but his frame of reference. He's not a technology person. His frame of reference is looking backwards. His frame of reference is looking at all the historical debt crises and everything else, and that's most people's frame of reference. Not understanding what.
yeah,
I'll give you an example of a company I chair, um, and it's really interesting. It's early in but global food production. Why is there so much fragility in it? because it's been centralized.
Hmm. Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
and you need long supply chains, and you
Yep.
need low cost labor to come in to pick the stuff, and you need fertilizers, and you need a whole bunch of pesticides because if the crop goes, you lose everything. You need more and more and more and more, and margins are really thin. And farmers are, and then a weather event comes in, wipes out everything else, and you have these massive problems, supply chain problems. It's a supply chain problem.
Hmm. Hmm.
So one of the companies, most people will try to innovate because that's where all the business is today. They'll try to make incremental innovations to try to make it cheaper to for labor or cheaper to something else to pick all the stuff.
Yep. 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 Yep.
And 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 that's where a bunch of innovation goes and talks about everything else. The real game winners, the real changes, if they get away with it, look at that and say that whole thing. They zoom out, look at the whole thing. And so this company created essentially we call it a cube, but commercial grade farming that is so efficient that you can localize farming anywhere,
Hmm.
and it and these trays come to you. So it's not a container, but you localize and multiple trays. How fast that company is growing right now, what its order book looks like as a result of this, because now you can localize production. It makes the entire existing supply chain it slowly and then faster and faster and faster, just like Bitcoin. Looking,
That's a 0 to 1 innovation. I think it's funny how innovation always happens in a way that, when the world swings one way too much. So like, the path to riches and, winning and all this sort of stuff, it seems, particularly I think fueled by fiat and money printing, has been to squeeze small efficiencies. Kind of, it's almost like the Blockbuster example of adding the lollies. Yeah, exactly. And then the just in time and all this sort of stuff. But in reality, the big win was in saying, all right, instead of squeezing more out of, like, instead of trying to beat a fucking dead horse, uh, let's retransform it and build something that's robust, instead.
those are the those are the companies. People could go to my personal website and see some of the companies I'm involved with if they were interested, even in jobs or anything else. Um, but those are the types of companies that is just super interesting to me. They don't all make it, but
Mhm.
um, but something that actually changes the game completely. It's so much fun. It's such a wild ride. And by the way, there are opportunities everywhere right now. Because the more people are hurting, the more the things are broken and everything else. Entrepreneurs come in and solve those problems. So there's lots of really good opportunities in the market right
Yeah, I mean that the human beings. I always say, human beings' natural state is capitalism, because capitalism is, the way I define it is getting the best use out of the capital that you have, and the capital that you have is your time, your energy, and some form of natural resource. So I think human beings' natural state is to innovate, is to do more with what we have.
now.
So that's always going to happen. What I'm personally excited about is, and we'll touch on this now when we go down the Bitcoin path, is on the other side of Bitcoin really maturing. I think hyper Bitcoinization is going to be a longer term process, but I think when Bitcoin is mature enough, I'm really personally excited about the kind of businesses and things that are going to pop up. And this ties into probably the sovereign individual thesis of the kind of businesses that will pop up when Bitcoin is, valued at 5, 10, 15, 20 million, where you've got these Bitcoiners with interesting values. Like I've always said that I want to start an airline again, which is in the spirit of when Richard Branson first started Virgin, which is like literally, so it's going to be for people that don't want to be vaccinated, that don't want to wear masks. It's going to be all business class, first class, with good looking stewardesses, and it's going to be the Mile High Club all over again. So I think we're going to see interesting things emerge down the track. And it's going to be because there's a gap and a need to be filled, and innovators and entrepreneurs and people are going to come in.
Robert Breedlove put a post. It's a Medium article, so if you want to look for it, he posted it. But I thought it was just a really interesting take that I hadn't seen before. Just using the multi-sig wallets, the functionality in Bitcoin to run contract law.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it, so you and I want to create, something. There's a there you owe me something once that, and I don't agree that it's been done. I could have a code, you could have a code, and we could hire an arbitrator to be able to decide. And if you some of these things, they so change the framework of law,
Mm-hmm.
state, what a company looks like.
Contracts, yeah.
It's so now it's really early on all of this, but it's so but when you think about some of these things and how that changes what you think, how you think you get things done now, and why solving trust in Bitcoin, it's a big deal.
Huge deal. That's one of the biggest innovations. Yeah, yeah.
It's a big deal. It's a really big deal.
That was one of the, I used to say that Bitcoin solved autonomous consensus and anonymous consensus. Like that has never been done in the history of humanity before, and it's like one of those 0 to 1 moments. I think what you're describing there with what Breedlove mentioned. Have you heard of discrete log contracts?
I haven't.
Okay, that's effectively what's Nicholas Doria, who's the founder of BTC Pay Server, and there's a whole bunch of them. That's actually what they're doing, which is using multisig, using Bitcoin's primitives to create contracts with.
Maybe that's what he was pointing to.
Perhaps, yes. So that's actually in the process of becoming a thing now. So this is an example of what we discussed earlier, which is how fast this stuff is moving. Like it's always strikes me as ignorant when people say, oh, there's not enough innovation happening in the Bitcoin space, so we need to go build something else. I'm always like, are you kidding me? Like the amount of stuff that is happening and being built on and around Bitcoin is like mind blowing. Like it's impossible to keep up. Absolutely.
It is impossible to keep up. And you're at the leading edge of it. I'm at the leading edge of it. And it's impossible to keep up.
Yeah, absolutely impossible. So, okay, in the spirit of time, I've got a couple of questions here that I do want to ask. But before I do that, can we quickly take the user down the journey? So we discussed what one option is in the absence of Bitcoin, but now we have Bitcoin. Thanks Satoshi, we have an option. We have a plan B as this madness continues to occur. Because I guess just even with Bitcoin's existence, all of this shit is going to continue to happen. We're going to go to MMT. We're going to go to whether it's UBI or whatever. So this house of cards is going to continue to collapse because they're trapped in their own catch-22 because of the slippery slope they're on. So then, what does the Bitcoin option start to look like? Then, what does that journey look like?
Well, people should read the article because number one. But again, what it means is technology at a high level. It means that entrepreneurs creating value for society, the value is shared more broadly with society. It means that prices will keep getting lower and lower and lower. Your labor will go down too. The price we pay labor will go down too. But your gain from everything you get will go up faster.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's like a mirror image, right?
Pardon me?
It's like a mirror image of the other option, right?
Exactly. It's a mirror image of the other option. And so we don't see things like we what is money anyways? It's an artificial construct. Right? How much money we have, everything else. It's measuring our time. And we work for a living to be able to make money so we can buy things and live a good life. And we get trapped into something that we need more and more and more and more and more. And it's all about living a good life. And so we can We family spend our time, but we get trapped in this. How much do we have to compare to the other person? Am I living a good life? I work. So all our time goes into this work while we're arbitrarily making that money worth less over time.
Mm.
So we stay on this wheel and everything else. It's one of those things. It's so hard to see, and it's so hard to see from that system what a new system would look like. But technology is supposed to free our time. That's what it's supposed to do. That's why we use it. That's why that's CEO, chairman of different companies. We put technology in so that we can do more with less.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yep.
And if we matched a system, Bitcoin, to do that, we would get more for less across our world. Everybody would. You would have abundance. You don't pay for the air you breathe. Why? Because it's abundant. And not because it's not valuable. It's very, very valuable. You don't pay for it because it's abundant. And that's the natural order of things. There's more abundance around. And so, yes, some things will come down slower. But imagine now you have a whole bunch of people that don't really need to work anymore as prices come down, and a whole bunch of people that are kind of coming out of labor force and seeing high margin markets. What do you think? What do you think is going to be attacked? that, that high margin markets that I can go after,
Yep.
and I can create my fortune.
Mm-hmm.
And as I create my fortune, the only way I create my fortune is by delivering more value to society.
Yep.
What do you think is going to happen to pricing everywhere? It's just going to keep coming down lower and lower, and that's what it would look like everywhere. It's so hard to see today because we're trapped into the other system. I asked this to even my dad. My dad finally read the Satoshi white paper. 10 years later, me talking to him about it, but he finally read it. 74 years old, and 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 he was really caught up in okay, well, now you have, and you see this as in a whole bunch of, now you have a whole bunch of Bitcoin billionaires, and they own the world. And I said, in that world, everything they spend transfers more wealth to everybody else.
Yep. Yep. It's a system. It's a closed system.
It's a system. So because he said, well, what if they built an army and everything? Great, they have to pay their army,
Mm-hmm.
and then the army has the Bitcoin, and they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so the point is, if you spend beyond your means, you can't control. Right? You can. It's just a time preference. But if you start using this for manipulative power, you lose your ability to.
I love this point actually, and I really want to touch on this. Is I think this distinction here of like, you know, this fear that some people have of Bitcoin oligarchs who will have all the power and all the money. In the current system, those people exist, but when they fuck up, we pay for it because they can just.
Exactly. I wish more people knew that. I wish
Yeah.
more people would dig into this point because if if you're if you're Bill Gates today, you could make a whole bunch of mistakes. Money will be printed. All your wealth will go up.
Yeah, correct.
More. You can spend infinitely, and money will be printed faster. And all your it's like having a cow in your backyard, and you want a steak, and you go and kill the cow, you eat your steak, and then it grows
again.
back. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
That's the way the existing system looks. That's not the way the system looks under Bitcoin. It's
Correct.
exactly the opposite. And it forces, and that's exactly with the point. It forces, I'm not going to say equality. It shouldn't be equality. There shouldn't be, there is always, a free market will always pay somebody more for their time if it's more valuable in a free market. Or if I do something for somebody that is more valuable than you do for them, they'll pay me more. Right?
We're all different. We're all different. That's the point.
We're all different. What I care is not about equality. What I care about is fairness. That's what a just system.
100%, 100%. That's one of the most important distinctions. And I think, tying like fairness over equality is the game, is the absolute game, because and tying that back to the Bitcoin oligarch theory is that, like you just said, there is no magical cow that reemerges again. When you in a Bitcoin system, the forcing function is to make better decisions because your Bitcoin is going somewhere. And you can't just replenish your stock at the expense of everyone else because you fucked up. So now the game, and it brings back, Taleb talks about this concept of ergodicity. It brings back the natural dynamic nature of life, which is people move up and down. That's what happens in all natural systems. No one is always 100% right. No one is always 100% wrong. No one is always valued at the same thing. We have this subjective reality that we live in. Innovation is dynamic. Everything else is dynamic. And what happens in a system, which is the world we live in today, is that people can stay stuck in their level of strata because they're close enough to the monetary spigot that they become beneficiaries of that at the expense of everyone else. Whereas,
yeah, I just want to build on that. I'm in an organization called YPO and the Young Presidents Organization. But what they would, I think, 1/3 of the world's wealth is in that organization, some sort of form in businesses and that organization has. And this is a conversation I've had often in YPO. I speak, and I will say this: there are a whole bunch of people in this. I'm not saying specific for YPO, but have no idea about what we're talking about.
mm-hmm.
They think it's because they're smarter.
Yeah.
It's because they're around these people that tell them everything else, and their houses are going up, and they were there first, and everything else. They have no idea. They're not bad people. Again, like anybody, some people are, some people aren't, but mostly really great people.
Yep.
That have just been caught in a lie, that believe that lie, and then there's a whole bunch of other people that will go and look at somebody's wealth and say they're smarter, because they have the wealth, and we defer to, we have this bias that we defer to somebody else that might have something. In fact, if you have more wealth or whatever, or if you're in this, you and I, don't listen to what I say. Listen, question, but look for yourself. Because one of the things that I've always been, for me, I cannot stand somebody with ego that is just sitting in a spot because of that ego and looking down at everybody else. You want my hot button? That's my hot button. So if you've been given more, if you get more, you better have humility. And that humility, by the way, makes you look around, because what happens is people defer to you. They say, "Oh, you're right because you're there." You have to look harder. You have to and you want to believe it. So you have to have massive humility. What would it look like to somebody else? What would it look like?
I think there's an evolutionary reason for that. So I'm writing an article now which looks at hierarchies of competence, and I think fundamentally and naturally speaking, the reason why we look up to people who either have a position of status is because human beings in all natural systems evolve through hierarchies, because hierarchies are fundamentally important. Like, how else do you know what to do first, or importance, the very nature of the concept of importance emerges because of hierarchies. And we as human beings over time have evolved these hierarchies of competence. And I think I discussed this in one of my recent articles, where I talk about fiat authority versus natural authority. And we emerged from the primordial ooze because of the forcing function of natural authority, which is people who are good at stuff either through experience or through trial and error or through skill or through talent, naturally emerged at the top of their, you know, local hierarchy because of competence, and that's perfectly natural. Whereas today we have these fiat authorities, and we have these fiat hierarchies where you're not at the top because of competence or because you're adding value or because you're, you know, it's a functional hierarchy. You're there because you are close enough to the monetary spigot where you can build a moat, not of value or innovation or any of that sort of stuff. You can build a moat because you're a very effective parasite, and
Yeah,
that's
and
a very dangerous situation.
so you're right on some of that, and I would just be careful because it's a lot of people don't know it, right? They don't they just don't know they're caught into this trap. It's not for but from other hierarchies, it's the same thing going back to our energy. It's easier to trust if somebody's there, they've already gone through all of this. They must be there for a reason. So we defer to them. I'll give you something I made at least in the high tens, maybe hundreds of mistakes on. um, in hiring the person from the big company because they were at the big company. They
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be the big.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And and when you actually pull on the thread of that, what you realize is a lot of those people. Like if you looked at any company, there's maybe the 30% of the people that are just killing it all the time, and the 70 and then the 20% that are not doing anything in the kind of the middle amount. And then why would that company look any different? They were just there at the right time, and technology grew up in the right place, right time, and some of those people got carried along for the ride, and then ended up being, wow, superstar, superstar, superstar. When we would hire those people, they were total duds, total duds.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that the good companies didn't have great people,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
you also made this exact same mistake because you had a bias thinking all of those people in that company must be great because they were at that company. So again, I do it too. That's actually why I say you have to have way more humility and you have to look deeper on these things.
I think what you're describing there is what Tyler describes as fools of randomness. And the thing is, in every system, I mean, we're in many ways ourselves fools of randomness in many ways because, you know, we were randomly lucky enough to be born where we were and all that sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
like you can't remove randomness from a system. And I think that's really important. So you're always going to get it. I guess where my point was going is that of the because of the deranged or the skewed incentives in the society that we live in, where, you know, responsibilities are removed from the individual, and basically I think it's, you could almost boil it down to the the elevation of the collective over the individual, and in the process of doing that, we remove, you know, responsibility, we remove critical thinking, the we create a higher incentive for more fiat hierarchies as opposed to hierarchies of competence, and you end up, I think, getting a larger percentage of uh, these deranged versions of status versus, you know, natural competent status, and that may also just be a how the system tries to, you know, restabilize itself. So if I, you know, apply a lens of humility here, is it, you know, it you know, it's not, you know, maybe explicitly the fault of people in positions of status that are there for reasons of fiat as opposed to reasons of competence. It may not be
Okay.
entirely their fault. Yeah.
So that piece, and I love what you just said there. That piece is what I might disagree. So I totally agree with what you just said.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get because you in Bitcoin, once you've gone down that rabbit hole and you keep going down the rabbit hole, you realize it touches everything.
Yeah.
And so there's people with that knowledge, and there's people without it. And we assume that everybody has our knowledge. We assume that people how can't they think like this? And what I can tell you is seeing the other side and how people are thinking about this, they just don't have a clue. It's not bad, mostly not bad people. They're just caught in a system, and they care about their own kids, and they care about their own lives and everything else, and they care about what to do next with that. They don't know what everything else is happening around.
Cool. So then that brings me then to probably my final big question of this conversation before we wrap this up, because I know we're running out of time here. How then, I mean, aside from Bitcoin fixes this, how do we fix that problem that you just mentioned? Is it's good people with good intentions that are paving our road to hell. How does this get?
Empathy. Empathy. They don't know. Just realize every time you think they know, even the people that are like the leftists that were the people most hurt by this that are coming after me. Okay, um, and again, my crusade. This isn't my job. I don't make $1 from this thing. I do this for my kids. I do this for the. I really do. I don't need to. I really care. I care a lot, and I've grown really close to a whole bunch of people in this community because they also care. But that's why I do this. So if it's your business or if it's risking somebody else's business, you can imagine those people might care more. They might be more on the edge and everything else, and they might not be able to see the other person's view because their family goes to zero or something else. So in this, I would say the biggest thing is just because you realize it, first think about where might you not have all the answers and where could you do a better job. Second, just because you realize it doesn't mean everybody else does. Teach them with kindness.
Okay, but that's, I guess I want to pull some of the threads of nuance there. So that's empathy on the part of us enlightened ones, right? So like of some of us who've sort of worked this out. But I'm speaking more structurally because I think empathy again lends itself to people with good intentions taking us down the path of hell, right? So it's like you can have a lot of empathy. And so there's a great, if you're familiar with Alan Watts, the philosopher from the 70s, but he says a beautiful little thing, which was, he said, the monkey said to the fish, "Come here and let me save you from drowning," as he puts the fish up into the tree, right? So he had empathy for this fish and killed the fish. So I think that's a very, so I think empathy
so one of the things, but a lot of people confuse sympathy with empathy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. True. Yeah.
I want to. Empathy is understanding somebody else's point of view, so that you can better communicate. I used to say, so walking a mile in somebody's shoes, and so when you disagreed with them, you had their shoes and you were a mile away. So, but it's not agreeing. It's just understanding their point of view, and really understanding their point of view and what they might see from their point of view. With that, you can better communicate. It doesn't fix every single disagreement or anything else, and you're not going to save everybody. That's not that isn't the job. Why? I'll go way bigger. Why do you do it? Why do you?
Me personally. Me personally.
Yeah, you personally.
I'm trying to give a succinct answer here, but I guess I have values that are rooted in certain things. So particularly when I was younger, I did a lot of exploration of personal values, but I have a high value for freedom. I have a high value for growth as a human being, so learning, discovering, transforming. I have a high value for creating, building things. So for me, it feeds at the very core on all of these values. And I think when I look at my entrepreneurial expression of my passion around Bitcoin, which is Amber, I feel like I'm able to feed the need or feed my value for freedom and growth and all these sorts of things through that. I feed it through these podcasts, I feed it through that. So I think at the very base level, the reason why we do any of these things is we have these values, these drivers, these needs, and we sort of feed them through.
I'm going to go one bigger, and I'm going to use
Okay.
me as an example.
Okay.
It's all of that is true. It's not
Mm-hmm.
that's not true. But the real reason you do it, the real reason is love, just love. This sounds so.
Okay, no, if we're gonna chunk up to that level, I would challenge. I would say meaning, but yeah, if we could say love, meaning.
Let me, but we don't see why we do things. So I use this example: the victim, sign on their forehead that they're a victim. Right? They're a victim. Everything. Woe is me. It always happens to me. Why are they victim? They want the response.
It's a cry for love. It's a cry for attention. Yeah.
What happens when they don't? What happens when they don't get the response? What happens when they burn out every friend? Friends can't take it anymore. What do?
They maybe draw love from themselves. Depression.
Double down.
We'll double down.
More drama, right?
Yep.
It has to be a bigger drama. Create more of it. So in other words, what they're doing is they're pushing away everything they want. That is all there for them to just change their mental model, and they're pushing the thing they want most away with what they're trying to get.
Yep.
By the way, I've gone through this myself. I've gone through. Why does the person work tirelessly all hours to say it's about their family?
Mm-hmm.
It's the exact same thing. It's the response that the work gives them that tells them they're valuable or meaning. They have meaning. And that love that they're trying to get sometimes pushes their family away at the same time, and they don't know it. And so it's easy to see the victim archetype in this, and we don't see our own archetype in it. Everything else, and it's nothing in that is bad or good or anything else. It's just we will tell ourselves any story we want to be able to get to that and keep getting it because it's so addictive. We want it so desperately. We want to belong. We want to be loved. And so it's okay. But what I would say is even this. Why would I say yes to do that? Same thing for me. It's the same thing for everybody. I have enough money. I don't have to do. I could just eat bonbons all day. So why do I do the thing? Why do I do the things I do? I like that recognition. Whether it's my family, whether it's with this, whether it's with my friends, those are the things I choose. Now, how do you make sure you balance them so that you're actually choosing, and it's not choosing you? Because it's so easy. If it's so easy for the victim not to see it, it must also be easy for us not to see it.
I think one thing you just said there is like you're choosing it as opposed to it choosing you is, I think, one of the. I don't think I framed my original question very well because we've sort of gone on this chunked up tangent of why we do what we do, which I love because I think that's a very important question. I think a lot of people, gloss past that and they trudge along in life, again completely oblivious to why they do what they do. And like you said with the victim persons, they really, it's a cry for help, it's a cry for love, and they push people further away, and they double down because they're unconscious as to what it is they actually want. And then their mechanism for attaining what it is they want, unconsciously is counterproductive. But I think for me, the most powerful book that I read in that was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I think that had one of the most profound impacts, because I think, yeah, meaning at its very core is like that's what, we are striving for. One of my adamant beliefs these days as well is, I think the pursuit of happiness, I think, is an empty pursuit. I think the pursuit of meaning is a deep pursuit, because happiness then comes as a byproduct. I think happiness is fleeting. It's something that if you pursue that, you end up empty, and you end up kind of like the reed that gets blown in the wind, because happiness, you can pick it up from some Instagram tweet or this or that or whatever, but meaning really requires depth and time and patience and sacrifice and struggle and all the things that we shun away from. But in that path of discovering meaning, happiness comes as a natural byproduct. You don't have to chase it; it comes to you. And I think that's such a
If you look at meaning, though, and these are just words that get go for, but everybody has a different construct of what it means to them. So it's hard to so by meaning love, same thing. Like, why do you
Mhm.
want meaning to love? That's just what I'm getting at. And it's funny that most of the podcasts we talk about what Bitcoin does and everything else. What I actually think it does is gets actually more people to realize, why are we doing it anyways? Like, what
Mhm.
is the thing
Mhm.
that really matters more? It allows them to step off this crazy wheel and to say, and 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 realize a whole but so many things change as a result. So many things change as a result, because you're not having to be in the jail trying to put trying to scrape by enough to feed your family. It changes.
It moves you from being at effect, and it's do you know it's I think I can interject here. What I was trying to get at in the beginning is that I think the way we structurally fix a lot of the problems is by reintroducing responsibility. And responsibility is another way for us, what you just said, to step off the wheel. Because when we're on the wheel, we're no longer conscious or responsible. We're at effect. If we use the NLP terminology again, we're not at cause anymore. We're not choosing what we want or why we're doing it. We're just in this blind race
Yeah.
where we're just doing shit because somebody else is doing it. It's like those people running on the street when we started running in one direction. They were just running because everyone else was. Whereas Bitcoin reintroduces your ability to choose.
And you know this because you've studied a bunch of this. It sounds like, but when people are stressed, they very rarely can get to that spot
Yeah,
where
yeah, yeah,
they hold the wheel tighter.
yep, yep, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Right? When people are stressed, they grip the wheel. They cannot see all of these things. So if
yep.
you take an entire the existing system and what it does to people without their awareness, they're gripping the wheel,
Hmm. Hmm.
and everybody,
Yep.
they can't see it, and and many are making really bad decisions by gripping the wheel. They can't see it, and when I say empathy, I get it. I get. I remember when I've been stressed and trying to make really great decisions. You your lizard brain comes out. You make really bad decisions.
Yes. Yeah. So maybe in a way we could say that Bitcoin helps you know take the wheel and move it away from us so that we
Over time, we're going to go through this transition. Expect a
we
lot
are.
of wheel gripping.
Yeah, indeed. Jeff, this has been a phenomenal discussion. I think there's so many other places that I would like to dig, but maybe we'll have to do a round two. um, One quick final question before I ask you. Actually, is there anything else you want to touch on here while we're on this point? Is there a bow you want to
I
tie on
think
this?
this has been awesome. It really has been. It really has been an awesome conversation.
Thank you. The last thing I was going to ask you there then was, you mentioned you've been reading loads of books since you were younger. For people who want to do some further study, I know we mentioned things like Viktor Frankl's book, etc. But Do you have a, top 4 or 5 off the top of your head that you would recommend that really had an impact on your life? And I know that's such a hard question. Everyone always asks me that.
On the spot, when you read a lot of books, that's really hard. The Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow
Okay.
is, I think,
Daniel Kahneman. Yeah. Yep.
is a really great book, because what you realize is, for me, when I read that, is, especially going through it, is how many mistakes I made
Hmm.
in my thinking, just biases, cognitive biases that I had in the way that I thought about things, and it forced me to see. We all have them, and it forced me to go down kind of a rabbit hole. So I just about read everything on that subject for a long time. The but I think that's a really great book, because it just helps you with your critical thinking.
Hmm. Can we throw 2 more in there?
Oh, let me see
Come on, I'm going
what
to
have
stretch you.
uh, just about anything on Stoicism
Hmm.
um, is the obstacle is the way is a great one. Um, what's Let me think of an artificial intelligence one. The Master Algorithm by Pedro Dominguez is a really good high level um, kind of where AI is. It's a little older now, but it's an easy read to say where artificial intelligence is going.
Did you like Nick Bostrom's book,
Yeah,
The Super Intelligence? Yeah. Okay.
yeah, yeah. That one was to me it was okay.
Okay.
Um, the I'll mind you, I loved what it kind of, are we living in the real world or not?
Which one's this? Is this another book or is this a chapter in the book?
Nick Bostrom. I don't know if it was in that book or not, but are we living in a virtual reality?
Yeah. He was one of the early guys. Have you actually? I'm curious because not many people have mentioned this book, but it was one of the books that had a profound impact on me, and I think if you've read it, would have had a similar impact on you. But Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz.
So that book, I liked it, but for me as an entrepreneur, it didn't. There was nothing new in it.
Okay, interesting.
Because that's what you live. Yeah, that's what I lived and everything.
Yeah. Okay.
So no, that one didn't. Same thing with Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. It didn't have those didn't have anything new for me.
Hmm.
Um, why don't I do that? Why don't I? When are you going to publish this?
Yeah, next couple days.
Okay, so why don't I do this? I'll take a crack at going through my bookshelf, and
Yeah,
I'll
sure.
come up with 5 or 10, and I'll send them to you.
Done.
Put them in.
Done. And I'll add them in the show notes for sure. All right, my friend. Well, if where can people find your work? Um,
Best is just at Jeff Booth on Twitter. My personal website is just a placeholder for some of the
yep.
companies that I'm involved in. It's jeffreybooth.com.
Yep. Cool. Perfect. All right, man. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for everyone who listened through. I think we definitely cracked 2 hours here, and so I hope you all enjoyed this. Definitely follow Jeff's stuff. I'm going to put a bunch of stuff in the show notes, and yeah, thank you very much for this, mate.